Fantastic. Excellent. All right. Very good. Well, a very good evening to everybody, or afternoon for you that's over in some of the other areas, perhaps. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And I'm so sorry that we weren't able to do this in person, but I'm absolutely thrilled that, as we were saying, it allows us to bring in people from all parts of the country. So that's really fantastic. So as you guys were saying, my name is Kevin. I'm the Director of Sales for African Travel. We are a tour operator based here in the United States, and our focus is on Africa 110%. We are absolutely thrilled and delighted, and always it's such an honor and pleasure to be working with Wallace Pearson. They're an amazing agency, 45, 46 years now, been around, so that's an extraordinary track record. And we love working with them. They are a great partner. And actually, just a little bit, because a lot of people say to us, or you might say to Angie or Ange or whoever, that you really have never heard of African Travel. Who is this company? So just a very little bit of background on why that would be is the fact that at African Travel, we truly believe in the value and what a travel advisor brings to the table. So we actually do not sell directly to the public. We're a wholesaler. So you can't call us and book it directly. We only work through travel agencies and travel advisors. So we really do believe in the value and what they bring to the table. It's very important. So the fact that you guys are all on this call, I assume you already know that, and that they have been a big part of your lives already, and hopefully done some amazing trips. And hopefully now we can get you to go to Africa as well. So at African Travel, our moniker is We Know Africa. And the reason for that is purely and simply, it is true. Everybody that works for this company is either born in Africa. I myself actually am raised in Zambia, which is in Central Africa, or they have lived in Africa, or at the very least traveled extensively in Africa. You know, there is a plethora of choices when it comes to traveling to Africa, whether it be which country should I go to, which lodge should I stay in, should I do a tented camp, and so on and so on. And so by doing Africa and nothing but Africa, it's very important that the people that work for us really have the inside track and the inside knowledge on that. You know, if you're traveling with a family and you want to know where the camps are that have units and rooms that actually are 2 bedrooms and they're interconnected, which is not the most common thing in Africa. It's becoming more common, but these are very important details to know. So we can absolutely help with that, and that's what we're here for, to work in conjunction with with Wallace Pearson and to give you the very best possible experience that you can have. And as I say, we are 24/7, 365. Our single focus is Africa. The countries that you see in the map there to the right, these are the countries that we currently offer. And tonight, what I want to do, I'm going to spend a little extra time probably on South Africa. It tends to be what I consider to be Africa 101, but we'll take a look at East Africa, what the differences are, and then we'll take a brief tour of all of the other countries, in fact, and tell you why they differ one from another, why one might be better. And of course, you know, we do offer Egypt, as you see up in the north of Africa there, which is always very interesting because a lot of people just never think about of Egypt as being Africa. But of course, it is on the continent of Africa. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Egypt tonight. That's a very kind of different product, but we do offer it. And then, of course, we never want to forget our friends down on Madagascar, the island just off the coast of Africa, and out in the Indian Ocean in Seychelles and Mauritius. We also work with them. Now, African Travel is part of what is the Travel Corporation, and I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the Travel Corporation, but Travel Corporation is the largest privately held travel company in the world. So it's a very well established, it is actually celebrating this year 100 years of having been in existence and in business. So that's an amazing track record. But what I do here is I just like to explain, because so many of you are familiar with other brands that fall under the same umbrella and under the same roof. So people like Uniworld and Insight Vacations, these are companies that you may well have heard of before. So it's just to give you a better idea of some of who our sister companies are, who we're in bed with, and that we are in very good company indeed. And at African Travel, of course, you know, sustainability and giving back is a huge part of what we do. So the Travel Corporation does have its own Tread Right Foundation, which is our not-for-profit organization. And our 3 pillars of giving back are to the environment, to the planet, to the animals, of course, conservation, but also very much to the people. We're always looking for ways that we can give back to the communities. We're very big on putting kids through high school and into universities, and so on and so on. Our mission here is that we want to leave the planet in better condition than we found it, and we work very hard to do that. So one of the biggest problems with traveling to Africa is that Africa suffers from the Africa is a country syndrome. So this is rather rustic kind of look, but I just like to show it because I think it really gives you a much better idea of just how big this continent is. So I don't want you going to Debbie or to Andy or whatever and saying, well, I want to go to Africa and I've heard that Cape Town's amazing. And of course I want to go to Victoria Falls and I'd love to go and see the migration. And I definitely want to go and see the gorillas in Rwanda. And I'd love to go to, and while I'm there, I might as well go and see the pyramids in Egypt. And I want to do it all in 10 days. It just simply is not feasible. So, you can see how the United States is superimposed on here. We know how big our own country is. And therefore it just gives you an idea of scale and how to really kind of be a little bit more practical and realistic about how much ground you can cover in the time. Now, if you have the time to cover, and we do know of a family that just took a year and did so much. But if you do have a year, well, hey, we could show you all of Africa. If you have 3 or 4 weeks, we can show you a big chunk. But the average people, most travelers are going for somewhere between 12 to 15 days. So we tend to pretty much need to segmentize South Africa or East Africa, something like that. But this is just to really give you an idea of how big it is. So as I said, I do want to start a little bit with South Africa. I really consider South Africa to be Africa 101. It's a terrific option for anybody that has never been to the continent. There is so much to offer. And first and foremost, everybody that you're going to interact with is going to speak English. You're going to have hot and cold running water everywhere, flushing toilets everywhere, and food that is absolutely amazing all across South Africa, not only in the city of Cape Town, which, by the way, city of Cape Town now considered to be one of the top 3 cities in the world for foodies. It's just amazing. The restaurant scene there is incredible. But the thing that we hear from you guys when you come back is, wow, we were in the middle of nowhere. We were in the middle of the bush of Africa, and the cuisine that they were producing was fantastic. So it's going to be a lot of food that you recognize, a lot of brands that you recognize, but also a lot of food that you don't recognize. And I think, one of the great wonders and the great pleasures of traveling is to try something you don't know. But the good thing about it here in Africa is if you try it and you don't really like it, there's so much stuff you can fall back on that you're much more familiar with and that's going to suit your palate. So it really, truly is an amazing, amazing destination. You'll see down in the bottom left here, Cape Town. Cape Town is one of the top 5 cities in the world, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but just to give us some kind of idea of where we're going to go. So we're going to go to Cape Town, and then we're primarily going to go up to the north east side of the country, which you see the word Kruger Private Reserve there, along with Madikwe, Thornybush, and so on. This is all the Kruger National Park area. And what we tend to do is we prefer to work with the private reserves that surround Kruger National Park. Kruger National Park is very typical of your national parks. You've got a lot of lodges in there that are 150, 200 rooms. People can drive their car in there for the day. Bus tours go there, that kind of thing. But in the private reserves around, each reserve will only have maybe 3 or 4 or tops 5 lodges, and each lodge only has between 12 and 15 rooms. So this means that in camp or in lodge at any one time, there is no more than 20, 22, maybe 25 people maximum. So it makes for a much more intimate, exclusive feel to the experience. It's really wonderful. So we do tend to, we do everything in those private reserves. But, and I certainly here in the American market, Kruger, of course, is what most people have heard of and what they know. But your game viewing and your safari experience does not need to be in Kruger. If you look down there, where kind of in the middle on the coast, you'll see Shamwari Game Reserve. I love Shamwari. They have an amazing program with rhinos and so on, and conservation. But the great thing about it is So it's a little bit more removed. They have all of the animals that you would expect to see and hope to see. They have fantastic, absolutely amazing high-end luxury lodges where they are going to hold your hand and it's going to be white gloved all the way through. And one of the great things about Shamwari is because obviously when you're traveling to Africa, the number one question we get from everybody is, what about shots? What about malaria? What about things like that? So the good news about South Africa is that no visas and no shots required for South Africa. No visas, that is for US passport holders. If you're not a US passport holder, you do need to double check with the embassies and so on. But for US passport holders, no visa required and no shots required. And malaria, while yes, it is prevalent, and particularly up in the Kruger area and other, of course, many other parts of Africa too, it's not a requirement. It is only a recommendation that you take malaria prevention. So that is a discussion you would have with your doctor. However, the great news is that at Shamwari, Shamwari is malaria free. So this allows us to give you an incredible high-end, top-of-the-line safari experience in a malaria-free. And I know a lot of times when people are traveling with their families, particularly younger children and so on, they would prefer not to go the route of having to do malaria prevention. And so Shamwari is just an amazing, amazing experience or amazing option for that. So really, why are we going to South Africa? Well, yes, of course, we all want to see the animals, or most of us do. It is always interests me that every now and then I come across somebody who says, I'm dying to go to South Africa. I have no interest in the animals at all, none. And I'm like, if you go all that way, how can you not even go for one day just to see? Because I think you'll be converted. But it is interesting. They want to go for the city. They want to go for some of the other experiences and for the cultural highlights, of which there are many. So I did mention Cape Town first, and no visit to South Africa really and truly would be complete without a visit to Cape Town. And the fact that we can do this city visit in conjunction with safari in the country makes South Africa is one of the reasons why we should be traveling to South Africa. So Cape Town is a absolutely beautiful city. It's surrounded on three sides by water, the iconic Table Mountain in the background. It's a very outdoorsy city, a very green city. So for any of those of you that have been to Sydney, Australia, that same kind of feel. It's just a wonderful, wonderful city. And the number one request for optional touring would, of course, be to go up Table Mountain. The views from the top are absolutely spectacular. And this is the cable car that goes up. The great interesting thing about that is that as this cable car ascends or descends, the cable car slowly rotates. So you don't have everybody in the car trying to rush off to one side to get their images and pictures over the city, over the ocean, and whatever it might be. It does rotate 2 or 3 times, as I say, on the way up and on the way down. And the images and seeing the mountain up close like this as you're going up it is just as beautiful as looking out over the city or the ocean. The other or second most popular optional touring would, of course, be out to Cape Point. And Cape Point is one of the most important parts of our planet geographically. It's where the Indian Oceans and the Atlantic Oceans come together. Now, I'd love to stand here or sit here and tell you that, when you're out at Cape Point, you can absolutely see a line where the two oceans come together. Unfortunately, of course not. But it is an incredibly beautiful part of Africa. It's very rugged, it's very blustery, and it's just a really, really cool thing to do. And in conjunction with that, and therefore on the same day, we can just go about 20 miles along the coast and we get to Boulders Beach. And Boulders Beach is a home to a year-round colony of penguins. So you don't have to go all the way to Antarctica to see penguins. We have them for you in Africa. And as I always like to say, who doesn't love to see a couple of penguins kissing on the beach? Now, if you're into wine, the South African wines have come such a long, long way in the last, oh my gosh, 30 or 40 years. They are now winning prizes with the very, very best of the French and the Californians. But even if you're not into wine, you can see from this, the winelands are stunningly beautiful. This is a Kodak moment at every turn. So even if you're not into wine, because the winelands are only about 20 miles from the center of Cape Town. So it's very easy to do it even just for a half day. If you're interested in wine, you can go out and do a tasting. There are amazing restaurants out in this area. So you can have lunch and then come back in. And if you're not into wine, certainly go out, do your photography. It's a beautiful scenic drive. You have an amazing lunch and then come back into the city. But a lot of people actually opt to go and spend 2 or 3 nights out in the winelands because there are some amazing, absolutely fantastic boutique hotels out in this area as well. So if you're into that area or like to do something like that, it's really worth doing. Now, the people in South Africa are incredibly welcoming. They are so friendly. They're always smiling. They're just wonderful people. I always feel I have to apologize here because I kind of feel like I'm showing the three-headed lady here, but they really are wonderful, wonderful people. And we also always have in every country that we go to and every itinerary that we do, we always make available to you the option to do a cultural experience. So what I should have actually started with, and I realize now we kind of ran off a little bit on a tangent here, I should have explained to you that actually at African Travel, we do everything so that you travel on an independent basis. So we are not, we're a great believer in this is certainly an investment of your time and absolutely an investment of your money. Therefore, this should be done at the pace that you want to do it. So that you're not running after a group or being kept back by the slowest person in the group. So we don't do any traditional group departures. Now, if the guys at Wallace Pearson want to put together something, or if you have some friends perhaps, and there's 3 or 4 or 5 couples of you, or 10 people, or 8 people, or 9, or whatever it might be, all the way up to, I don't really for Africa personally recommend much more than maybe 16 or 18. That 12 is kind of the sweet number. It works really well. We can absolutely do a customized group tour for that as well. But 95% of our business is absolutely, we are customizing everything. We're letting you travel. And then, of course, your question is, well, I don't know what I want to do. But that's why we're here. So we work with the advisors at Wallace Pearson, and they know you. They know your likes and dislikes. We know Africa. We bring the two together, and we make the absolute perfect marriage to make the perfect trip for you. And as I say, so back on this, any trip to Africa should include a cultural experience, but it's your choice whether you wish to do so or not. We're not forcing you to do it, but it's an amazing thing to do. And in South Africa, the cultural opportunities abound. It can be anything from taking, an hour out of your time and going to read to kindergarten children, which is so amazing. They sit around you and they've got these great big eyes and they're looking up at you. They're as fascinated by you as you are by them. Or to taking a little extra time out of your day, something that's wonderful for families to do, particularly with teenagers and so on, is maybe go out to a village or somewhere and you help plant vegetables or whatever it might be. And it's a really wonderful bonding experience in getting to know this culture. It's really cool. But then, of course, as we know, most people are coming to Africa for the safari experience. And what happens in South Africa, and I'm going to use this word in the most positive terms possible. In South Africa, you are going to be shocked, but really positively shocked, by how up close and personal you will be with the animals. This image is not doctored in any way at all. So you're going to get very, very up close. And the idea, of course, for most people is to look for the big 5. So unfortunately, right now, the rhinos are in terribly, terribly, terribly endangered situation. We at African Travel have a rhino initiative where we're doing a lot to try and save the rhinos, along with all our regular animal conservation. But the rhino situation, the plight of the rhinos is critical. We're losing this race and we're doing everything we can. So they are absolutely part of the big 5, along with the leopard, which is the most elusive of them. Of course, the elephant, buffalo, and the lion. But I always beg with everybody at this stage, I really hope that we can do everything we can for these rhinos and every opportunity you ever see, because next time we do this and next time I'm talking to you, I hope we're not talking about the big 4. This is very, very important. But again, as you can see, they absolutely, you will be so close to them. It's so incredible. It's just mind-blowing, life-changing, jaw-dropping. The adjectives, the superlatives can't be enough of what's going to happen. So when you're on safari, what will happen is, when you're in the Cape Town version, by the way, it will be more like a regular city tour. You have a city tour. You're going to have your private guide with your car. They'll take you around, and you'll do generally what you would normally do if you visited a city on a private basis. But once you get onto the safari portion of it, so now 3 meals a day are going to be included. And 2 game drives per day are going to be included. So the typical day on safari starts very early, somewhere around about 5:30 in the morning. They will be calling you and telling you time to get up. And then we all meet in the front of the lodge around about 6. We have a coffee, a muffin, something like that. And then 6:15, we're on the vehicle and we're out. And the game drive in the morning will be somewhere between 2.5 to 3 hours, depending on how much we see. And then we'll come back. Full breakfast is laid on. And when I say full breakfast, I mean everything: eggs cooked to order, omelets, and so on. Just an amazing, amazing breakfast. A lot of times I'll do it out on the lawn at the lodge and so on. And then we have a little bit of downtime. A lot of times the lodges or camps will offer a walking tour. If they do that, I highly recommend that you do it. It's an incredible experience, because when you're, obviously when you're on the Jeep, on the safari, you've always got the noise of the engine of the Jeep going. But when you're on walking tour, you have nothing but the complete and utter silence of Africa and the sounds of Africa. So it's really, really cool. It's just amazing. And it also gives them the opportunity to lift up rocks and things like that, and you'll see dung beetles and so on. And then you come back, you have lunch. In the afternoon, some people might go to the pool, some people, there might be a little spa, some people go back to the room and they read for a little bit, have a tea or something like that. And then around about 3:15 or so, we do regular formal afternoon tea. And a lot of times that includes a glass of champagne. And then maybe right about 4:15, we're back on the vehicle again for the evening game drive. And as for that, again, will be another 2 to 2.5 hours. And we have a wonderful, wonderful tradition in Africa that about 15 to 20 minutes before the sun sets, we stop the vehicle, we get out, and it's really cool because you'll be in a Jeep like this, and they're going to bring out tables and chairs and cloths and whiskey and gin and rum and vodka and beer and red wine and white wine and sodas and coffee and tea and tequila and anything you can imagine, and all the mixes that go with it. It's like Mary Poppins pulling it out of the bag, and then they add appetizers and stuff. So it all comes out of the Jeep, and everybody's like, where has this stuff been? How amazing. And we stop, and in a situation like this, might be in a riverbed, might be whatever it might be, and we stop and we pour a drink and we bid farewell to the sun. It's a fabulous tradition done all over Africa, and it's just a really cool experience. And then we pack it all up, get back into the vehicle, which means that the last 45 minutes or so of your safari is going to be in the dark. And safari in the dark is a very, very different experience to safari in the daytime. And it's amazing. You'll be going to be blown away by what the rangers can find in the dark. It's incredible. Now, the number one add-on to any South Africa trip is, of course, Victoria Falls. So Victoria Falls is the largest curtain of water in the world. It's one of the 7 natural wonders of the world, and also happens to be a UNESCO World Heritage Site. I am asked all the time, I've been to Niagara, do I need to go to Victoria Falls? The answer is purely and simply a resounding yes. Niagara is a drop in the bucket compared to Victoria Falls. It's absolutely amazing. A little piece of trivia that I mean, it's silly for me to share it in some ways, but, there was a lot of talk on Good Morning America and so on in the month of December, early January, that Victoria Falls was trickling and it was in a drought and all this sort of stuff. And it's very unfortunate they put that out, because they are actually having the biggest and heaviest volume of water coming over the falls than they've had in 100 years. This is an absolute record year and the sad thing is there's nobody there to see it. The spray that comes up from the falls can be seen 30 miles away right now. And the thunder from the falls, the villages and the town, the Victoria Falls town itself, which is, a few miles down the road, it's deafening in the town. It's absolutely spectacular. Sadly, nobody there. But I do hope that you all get to see it and that it's like that when you go as well. Because it is truly a great experience. You can be as crazy as you want here. You can go bungee jumping and zip lining and all sorts of cool things. If you see the folks in that very middle picture there, if you look just behind them, you see that there's two colors of gray there, a kind of a line. They are actually sitting on the edge of the falls. This is Devil's Cataract or Devil's Pool. They're a little crazy, they're a little suicidal, but they're doing it. It is one of the experiences you can do. But if you want to be something that's just a lot more sedate, you can walk. There is a manicured pathway that goes the full length of the falls, fantastic lookouts for photography and so on. And it can be very, very easily done. So it's a great, great experience. So let's run up now to East Africa super quickly. Actually, everything that I'm going to say about Kenya applies to Tanzania as well. So the difference here between East Africa and South Africa. So in East Africa, first and foremost, we don't have the Cape Town experience. Nairobi, of course, is a big city, and Nairobi is doing a big comeback. There are a lot of cool things, and Nairobi is now worth a night or two. You've got the David Sheldrick Foundation there, which is rescuing elephants, and you can see the baby elephants being bottle fed. We've got the Giraffe Center, where you have the opportunity to see the Rothschild giraffe, very highly endangered, and one of the only parts of Africa where you can see it, and also the Karen Blixen Museum from out of Africa. So there are things to do in and around Nairobi, but generally now the swaths of land in East Africa are much, much greater. This is really raw, majestic Africa. So because we're dealing with much greater areas than the private reserves that we work with in South Africa, the animals are much more dispersed. So it takes longer to find them. And you can drive an hour and a half, 2 hours and not see much. In South Africa, around every corner, here are the elephants, here are the lions, here are the giraffes. Everything is there. That's why it's actually very common in South Africa just to do 3 nights on safari. You will see everything that you wanted to see and more in that 3 nights. But in East Africa, it's much more safari centric. So it's not unusual to do 7, 8, 9, or even 10 nights on safari. And you'll go to perhaps 3 or 4 different areas, national parks, lodges, and so on. So as I said, and the same thing applies to Tanzania. So here, the big difference, though, is in South Africa, when you see the herd of elephants, it's going to be 10 or 12. It's wonderful. It's amazing. When you find the herd of zebra, and by the way, in Africa, we do call them zebras, not zebras, but you in South Africa, the herd of zebra will be 25, 30, 35, something like that. The herd of buffalo, maybe 35 or 40 strong. The pride of lions, 6, 7, or 8 at a time. When you get to East Africa, the sheer numbers of the animals are huge. So to find, a herd of elephants of 15, 20 at a time, a herd of zebra in 100 at a time, a herd of, wildebeest, if you particularly when you get to the Great Migration, the wildebeest can be thousands of them at one time. And because of the supply and demand for food, it means, of course, now the prides of lions are much larger. They will be 15, 16, 18 at a time. Now, you generally never will see 18 lions all together in one spot. There'll be some over here, the side of the track, some over that field, but they all belong to the same family. So it's absolutely amazing. Just to see the opportunity to see these animals, because in East Africa, a lot more rivers, so you will get the opportunity, if you're interested in the Great Migration, to do river crossing. Now, the problem with this is that nobody can guarantee. This is not animatronics, it is nature. And what happens here, the animals get to the river. They are very, very aware that in that river is a whole host of crocodiles waiting for the buffet to open. At each river they get to, they suffer the same plight. But instinct is pushing them on. They need to go to where the rains are and where the food is and so on. So instinct pushes them, and finally one goes and they all go. So the crocodiles get fed, but 90% of the animals get through, and it's an amazing experience. However, it is not possible to guarantee a river crossing. You could sit for 2 weeks and watch the animals hanging out on the side of the river, and the day you fly out is the day they choose to cross the river. But if you do, it is one of those amazing things. Africa is always going to be full of wow moments. So even if you don't get to see a river crossing when you're in East Africa, you will still have many, many wow moments at any country in Africa that you go to. And Tarangire National Park is actually one of my favorites. It's in Tanzania. I love it because it flies a bit under the radar. You know, in Tanzania, you've also got Serengeti, you've got the Mara, and so on. So those tend to be a bit more popular. And Tarangire flies under the radar, and it is loaded with amazing wildlife, but not so many people go to visit it. So we generally always recommend including Tarangire. And of course, Lake Manyara. And as the name would imply, it is on a lake. Amazing bird life, but a very good selection of 4-legged animals as well. And then in Ngorongoro Crater, So Ngorongoro crater is one of the largest volcanic craters in the world. It has an incredible array of wildlife. All of the wildlife that live in the crater never leave the crater, and no humans live in the crater. So here, all of the lodges are up on the rim of the crater, and it's wonderful to wake up in the morning and go out onto the balcony of your lodge, and you can hear the lions roaring down in the bottom of the crater, and the elephants trumpeting, and so on, and the clouds are falling down, cascading down in the sides of the mountains, like a waterfall. It's actually very deceiving, because just to let you know, these mountains, what look like hills in this image, they are actually 2,000 feet tall. So it's massive. The scale is absolutely massive, and it's an incredible, incredible sight. And then, of course, Serengeti. No trip to East Africa, Kenya, or Tanzania would be complete without Serengeti. It's probably the most famous of all the parks in all of Africa. It's really where the safari experience started some 70 years ago now, and it's absolutely incredible. And I talked earlier about the opportunity to do walking safari. So actually, it's interesting. Walking safari started in Zambia, which is where I'm from, but now it's pretty much available in all countries. Pretty much every country will offer it. The good thing about it, it is very safe, and the rangers are very, very well educated and geared onto reading the mood of the bush. So if there's any kind of antsiness going on or something, there will be no walking safari today if the animals are restless. But they will absolutely, if everything's calm and quiet and serene, you will usually have that opportunity. And as I said, it will also include the opportunity to see things you wouldn't see from the Jeep. And the other thing that's very common in East Africa, slowly starting to come into Southern Africa, a little bit more common now in Botswana, but is the hot air balloon experience. This is an amazing way to gently waft across the plains of Africa, just in total silence, except of course when they're pumping that gas, but generally in total silence, and to look down on the animals. And of course, at the end of it, you'll have your traditional champagne breakfast. And we promise, of course, not to land in a pride of lions or cheetahs or similar, but it really is a great way to do it. So back on the Great Migration a little bit, one of the questions I get is, when should I go to see the Great Migration? So as you can see from this map, the Great Migration actually is a 12-month of the year phenomenon, where these hundreds of thousands of animals move. So if you want to see the migration, and what we'll be looking at is the time of year that you're looking to travel, whatever works best for your plans, and then we're going to recommend camps and lodges accordingly that work for that. The great thing about this as well is that if you end up and you say, I really not sure I want to do the migration, be moving around like that, there are many, many, many animals. All species have animals that don't actually move. They stay in place. So anywhere in the Serengeti, anywhere in the Mara, you are going to see animals no matter what. But if you want to see the migration, we can actually make that happen for you. Now, moving a little bit further, or still in East Africa, but just a little bit more to the west, Rwanda. I just want to do that quickly. So Rwanda, of course, really has been known primarily for the gorillas. But now Rwanda has just made such changes. They've opened up a couple of new lodges. They have an incredible wildlife scene. And now it is possible to do 10 days standalone program in Rwanda itself. So the gorillas are the main event here. It is trekking to the gorillas. You have to be certainly pretty agile and be able to walk quite well. But it is possible, by the way, when you're doing gorilla trekking, they have porters that you can hire. And it's $25 for a porter, current rates. And you can hire up to 4 porters. So even if, we have people that walk with canes and sticks and so on, and a little less, able-bodied, and they hire 4 porters, and basically then they're not quite carrying you, but they're all but carrying you. So it's a great way to do it. So it really is accessible to a lot of people. But you do have to understand that the trek could be anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours through the jungle. The other thing that's possible to do here is the chimpanzee trekking, which very few places in Africa can you do this. Chimpanzees are neurotic. The gorillas are very laid back and they hang out there, but the chimpanzees are crazy and they're running. And to get an image like this, this is very, very difficult, but it's what we're all about, and it's a game for them, so it's a really fun thing to do. The lodges in Rwanda, I love the lodges throughout Africa. We always try to work with lodges that have some character, but in Rwanda, my gosh, I just love this one. This is like something out of Star Wars, which I think is just fantastic. And the people of Rwanda are amazing. Rwanda actually has a couple of pieces of trivia about it. First and foremost, the capital city of Kigali is the cleanest city in all of Africa. And the reason for that is, you may remember about 35 years ago, they had the genocide in Rwanda. And so now what the government has done is that in memory of the genocide, at one Saturday of the month, they require every able-bodied person in the city of Kigali to come out and clean the city. So it truly is the cleanest city in Africa. And also on top of that, now these people are so proud of this that many come out every Saturday and do it. Rwanda was also the first country in Africa to ban plastic bags when you go shopping. They did this several years ago. So you cannot, they were way ahead of the curve on that. And something I think is very interesting is Rwanda is the #1 country in the world for female representation in government. So 67% of the government is female. What's very interesting about that statistic is that United States, number 77 in the world. So Rwanda, way, way ahead. An amazing country, wonderful people, really cool. Let's move a little bit further south now and touch on Botswana. So big difference with Botswana to almost anywhere else is, of course, here this is home to the Okavango Delta. So the Okavango Delta is the largest inland delta in the world. And here, therefore, the animals have learned and adapted to living in, on, and around the water. And so, therefore, much of your safari experience will be in or on the water, which is amazing. And I told you before, every single trip to Africa is going to have its wow experiences. This is pretty wow in itself, but hello, what about this? If you come back with images like this, you are going to be the talk of your town's cocktail parties for weeks and months to come. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, I can't guarantee this is going to happen to you when you're in Botswana, but if it does, wow, it is a wow moment. It's incredible. And then right next door to Botswana, we've got Namibia. And the interesting thing here is Namibia is actually night and day to Botswana. They share this border. So you saw Botswana, waterlogged, the Okavango Delta, and then in Namibia, total desert. Red sand desert, absolutely amazing. And the animals here have adapted to living in, on, and around, in and on the desert. And you're going to see the elephants and the rhinos and lions and giraffes, all the animals you'd expect to see on an African safari living in the desert. It's absolutely amazing. And the sand dunes are hundreds of feet tall. It's an incredible, incredible experience. I will tell you that Namibia right now is pretty much the hottest ticket in Africa. And what does that mean? It means it's a little pricey. So, if you're thinking of Africa, because most people, we always say, we know, and Eric and Ange and Angie and Debbie will know for sure that everybody goes, I'm going to Africa and it's going to be a once in a lifetime trip. And we all sit there and go, yeah, whatever. Because we all know, everybody that's been to Africa cannot wait to go back to Africa. When you come home, that's the first thing that'll be out of your mouth. I can't wait to go back and see more. So if you want to do South Africa or perhaps a Tanzania as a first trip, and then something else. And then I really believe maybe in 2 or 3 years from now, Namibia will go off the boil. What will be next? I'd like to believe Zambia. It's kind of flying under the radar right now and has so much to offer, amazing things opening. And talking of Zambia, let's visit Zambia and Zimbabwe very quickly. So what I draw your attention here to here is the top left and top right. So that is Mfui Lodge in Zambia. And this lodge was built around a grove of mango trees. And the elephants had been feasting on those mango trees for generations, for hundreds of years. So when the lodge was built, the elephants were like, well, the heck with your lodge, we still want our mangoes. And their elephants are absolutely animals of tradition and habit, and their traditional paths took them through what is now the lobby of the lodge. So this is another wow moment. Again, we can't guarantee that this will happen while you're there, but if it does, oh my gosh, how incredible. And what's kind of interesting about it is that their path took them up what is now the stairways. So when the lodge realized what was happening, they actually built ramps, and the elephants don't use the ramps. They still go up and down those stairways. It's absolutely incredible. And I mentioned earlier about the sundowner, and I talked, that in the image that we saw earlier, they were in the savannah and on the plain. And just here you can see that sometimes it's done in a riverbed, and I promise you we do, of course, check for the crocodiles there before we do that. Jumping very quickly across the ocean now to Madagascar. Madagascar is the island. It is 500 miles off the mainland of Africa. And yet 85% of the flora and fauna found on this island is endemic to the island and found nowhere else on the planet. This is the Galapagos of Africa. You know, that 500 miles in geographic and geological terms and so on is nothing. But there is no crossover. None of the big animals that you will find in mainland Africa are in Madagascar and vice versa. 107 species of lemur on this island. It's just amazing. And color reigns supreme here. You know, in many parts of Africa, you'll see the gray and of course the blacks and whites of zebras and so on. But to see something like a tomato frog and whatever, very rare, because it just makes you stand out too much. And unless you're uber poisoning, you know, you don't stand much time. You're toast. Whereas in Madagascar, the largest predator is actually about the size of a house cat. It's called a fossa, and therefore color reigns supreme. The people are amazing here. They are so wonderful. I'll tell you, they're a little crazy. They're a little island fevery, but they're wonderful, wonderful people. And Antananarivo, which is the capital and really does need at least a night when you arrive to kind of find your feet and just catch your breath, is full of, it used to be a French colony, so it has all these wonderful boutique hotels with still a huge French influence. A lot of people on the island still speak French as well. And I draw your attention here to top right, and you see my little friend sitting there. So this is a blue-eyed black lemur. And his claim to fame is that he is the only primate on Earth, aside from human beings, that has blue eyes. So next time that you're down at the pub and doing your trivia, or it comes up on Jeopardy or whatever, you will know the answer to that little piece or to that question. So everybody says to me, okay, Kevin, this is all very well, and we love the animals and so on, but where are we going to stay? Is it going to be some kind of shack with a hole around the back for the bathroom and so on? Absolutely not. Nothing could be further from the truth. So this is a very typical lodge, the bathroom of. This is not a presidential suite. It's not, you know, this is not unusual to find this level of amenities and so on in a bathroom in a lodge in most parts of Africa, certainly in South Africa. No, not every lodge has the private plunge pool out on the deck, but many do. So if you're interested in a private plunge pool, we're going to make that happen for you. And then, of course, you always have the tented option. And a lot of people are always a bit nervous about tents. They think it's going to be the Boy Scout tent with the cot and the igloo next to them as a cooler and so on. Nothing could be further from the truth. Tented camps at the level that we work with, where air conditioning is required, every tent will be fully air conditioned. They all have private ensuite facilities for bathrooms and so on. This particular one that I'm showing here happens to have canvas flaps, but many, many tents actually have glass doors, whether they be sliding or French opening. So tented camps are incredible. In fact, most tented camps, if you didn't go and touch the side, the wall, and feel the canvas, you would barely know that you were in a tent. It's absolutely fantastic. Tented camps are definitely, I highly recommend, at least if you're going to do 2 or 3, if you do, if you're going to do a hotel in Cape Town, a lodge in on safari in South Africa. There is a wonderful, wonderful tented camp that I just love in the Victoria Falls area called the Victoria Falls River Lodge. It's tents. Each tent is right on the river. The animals, the elephants and the hippos play right there. Each tent has its own private plunge pool on the deck. It's small, but it's there. An amazing, amazing experience. So that's a great way to do it. And look at this, my gosh, how much more out of Africa do we get than something like this? I love it. And this just is, I think, the icing on the cake. So this is what we call a star bed. You normally would only spend 1 night here, but you know, the African sky is, we all live under the same sky. But the African sky has no light pollution, has no pollution in air pollution. It's millions and millions of stars, and what better way to do it than to see it than doing something like this. So this is what, as I say, what we call a star bed. And if you go to, if you see where the 4 poster is, if you go to the right-hand side of that, drop down 1 level and just a bit further to the right, you'll see that little enclosed area. That is your bathroom. So you don't have to pee over the edge of the, on the bed level at nighttime. It's really cool. The kinds of vehicles you can expect expect to be in. Top left here, South Africa, very common, the open jeeps. In the center there on the right-hand side, closed, much more common in East Africa. Reason for that is because I explained you are going to travel much greater distances in East Africa. So air conditioning becomes much more of a need. But many of the lodges, once you get to a lodge in East Africa, and if you spend a couple of days there, they are now moving to having for your daily game drives the open. But wow, what could be more fun than doing the Makoro or dugout canoe? Very common in Botswana, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And we already talked about the big five, but of course there's a myriad of others. And my friend Jeffrey the giraffe, just very quickly down on the bottom right there, that is a honey badger. That is the most elusive of all animals in Africa. I know rangers who have been in the business for 40 years and have never yet seen one. I also happen to know some that have seen 3 in a week. That's very, very, very rare. That is actually the meanest critter in all of Africa. Even the lions are afraid of this guy, but very difficult to see. We already touched on the sundowners. This just gives you another view of what happens and everything that comes out of that Jeep and how amazing it is and incredible. And if you're doing a celebration, a 50th anniversary, if you have grandchildren or your own children or yourself are doing a second honeymoon, a first honeymoon, whatever it might be, Africa is, or a 60th birthday, whatever it might be, Africa is something very, very special is going to happen to you when you go to Africa. It's a life-changing experience. Those of us that have been to Africa know what I'm talking about. The rest of you all think I'm crazy and cuckoo for saying it, but when you come back from Africa, you will join our club and you will understand what we're getting at. You have a very special affinity with others who have been to Africa. So what better way than to do something very special and have a special celebration there? So I'm so passionate about Africa. I could have gone on until cornflakes time tomorrow, but I know that's not feasible. But we would love for you to come and experience. One of the biggest questions I always get, I'm surprised nobody asked today, is when is the best time to go? So actually, of course, you saw the size of Africa on that map where I had United States superimposed and how big it is. We all know how the climatic regions of the United States vary, that Wisconsin in January is very different to Florida in January. Michigan this week is very different to Georgia this week, and so on and so on. So same, of course, applies in Africa. For South Africa, peak period is really from mid-August until the beginning of November. My personal pick for South Africa, or Southern Africa in general, is May. I love May. The weather is terrific both day and night. It's going to be dry. The rains have finished in March. Everything is still very green and lush. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful time to be there. 2 other reasons to go in May. Now, you will go anytime and you're going to see baby animals. There are many species that have their babies all year round, but some species do tend to kind of prefer and favor having their babies in a time of abundance. And a time of abundance would be the rainy season, which in Southern Africa is from December until March. So by the time we get to May, those babies are now 3, 4, 5 months old. They're much more independent. The mothers are less protective, particularly the predator mothers. So it's really cool. Who doesn't love to see the babies? But that doesn't mean that if you go in October or November, you won't see them. They're, elephants and giraffes and lions have babies all year round. The second other big reason I love Southern Africa in May is, of course, it is full flood time at Victoria Falls. In its absolute glorious best. It's just water on steroids. It's incredible. But people go to Victoria Falls at all times of the year and are very impressed just purely by the sheer size of it and scale of it. But if you're going in the drier months, which would be sort of in September, October, that's actually the time when you consider that Devil's Pool that I showed you. There's only about 6 weeks in the year that you can actually do that. And some people like to go there because they want to do that. It's as I said, a little crazy. When it comes to East Africa, peak period, really from kind of late May through to August into the beginning of September. My pick for East Africa is actually November. Now in November, they have what they call the short rains. And it's weird. They have long rains and short rains. So their long rains are February, March, and in April. Their short rain is in November, and what it means is that there is the potential every day for a really short burst of rain. It might be 10, 15 minutes, and it sometimes happens in the afternoon. It might happen in the evening. I've been to Tanzania and Kenya many, many times in November, and I can honestly say never once have the short rains interfered with our trip. It's always been great. So it's kind of a shoulder season. It's not so crowded. Pricing can be a little better. So that's my tip for both East and South, May and November are my things.
That's when we were there, Kevin, in East Africa was November. And just, I don't know if you can see the chat box, but Mindy did ask, what's the most popular or best location to take two boys that are under the age of 10?
Okay, so my my honest answer to that is really going to be South Africa, because you've got that city experience, and but it's not like going to a European city. You're not being force marched around museums and castles and cobblestone streets and so on. It's very outdoorsy, as I said. The views are fantastic. It's blustery. It's really cool. You've got the opportunity to do some cultural, if you want to include that, and then you've got the very really easy safari experience where you can go out for 3 nights, and then you can couple it with Victoria Falls. So you're doing three very different things, which keeps them entertained, and they're entertained within what they're doing as well. So, I know at that age they need to be entertained all the time. Um, Tanzania is very, very good for what I would consider to be the tweens, because again, lots of animals, but it is a lot of moving around in Tanzania, and potentially with those longer drives, particularly if you're doing it by road. Um, Tanzania can either be done by road or by flying. Obviously, I love doing it by road because you really are getting to see everything. If you're flying, you're overflying, and then you're game viewing and overflying and game viewing. That's your person. It comes down to what you kind of personally choose to do. And with kids of that age, a lot of that now is going to come down to really, your honest opinion of what the kids are, how they're going to travel better. Are they going to, because sometimes when you're doing flying, say for example, you're up in the northern part of the Serengeti, when you come back down to Arusha, which is more of the international port to get in and out, you may do, these are small planes, they're 8, 9, 10 seaters, and you may make 3 or 4 stops all the way down to pick up, drop off people and so on. A lot of people don't want to do that, or if they feel that they want to do it by road, but the longer drives are not going to, the kids are not going to be so happy, and they want their Xboxes and their game, whatever it might be. So that's a choice that, until we know more about the kids themselves, and that's something that you could, honestly take a look at and decide. And when we're talking, with the advisors at Wallace Pearson and with Angie and so on, we're going to absolutely ask you these questions. We want to know everything you can tell us, and then we will recommend accordingly. Because as I said at the beginning, there's a plethora of choices. There are lodges and camps that work for everybody, but we need to know not necessarily what you think you're going to like in Africa, but we want to know what worked for you in the past. What hotels have you stayed at in the past that you absolutely loved? What places have you been that worked for you? And every bit as importantly to us is, what did you do that may not have worked for you in the past? So therefore we can avoid that. Do you like, if you're in Cape Town, do you like big modern glass hotels, or do you like something that's much more small and a character of the country and only has 13 or 14 rooms in the city? These are questions that are very important, and there is a market for every establishment and every property. So we will ask you all those so that we can then work with the advisors and create the absolute perfect itinerary for you. This is a very big trip for you. It's a dream list for everybody, and we want it to be perfect.
And Kevin, I think a lot of times too, you can make sure that you have a private vehicle, so it's just you and the kids. And then a lot of the camps will even send someone with you so that maybe the kids have some extra entertainment.
Oh, absolutely. And that's exactly my point. So there are camps that are very, very well suited, and they actually are happy to take the kids out. Of course, they don't take them very far, but they're showing them amazing things, and it gives you as a parent a break. But the ranges are out there. It's an education. I mean, this is not, going on a Carnival cruise and doing the kids club. This is education, but they make it fun, and they really make it cool. And the kids come back. And that's another thing we hear a lot of times is, we were a little hesitant to take our kids. Does it really work? They come back and go, wow, my kids have changed forever for the best. They learned stuff, they met people, they saw things. You guys know better than anybody. You've just done it for a year and with your family, and my gosh, I'm sure they are totally different. I remember you talked about it and said a year out doing this kind of thing is really better than anything you can ever get in school. It's an amazing experience. And but there are definitely certain For example, in South Africa, there's a lodge called Kapama Karula. It is fabulous, but not for, I wouldn't take a family there. This is very much it's really geared to adults. So we know those things. We know all this stuff inside out. We know, like I said earlier, not every lodge has the ability, because many lodges have individual units and you can't get more than 2 people in there or 3. So there are some lodges that absolutely have a much larger unit that will have a living space and 2 bedrooms. One of the big things about that is, do the kids have access to the outside directly from their room? If you're in the middle of the bush and in the wildlife, you don't want that. So we need to know, depending on the age of the kids, when they're 16, 17, 18, hopefully they're responsible enough they wouldn't. But when they're 8, 9, and 10, you definitely want something that's going to work where you have your privacy in your space, but they are absolutely secure where they are too. So we need to know those things, and we will then recommend and work with lodges and camps accordingly.
What about packing on safari, Kevin? How much do you have to take?
Okay, so a very good question. And actually, the biggest mistake everybody does here is that they overpack. So definitely all the ball gowns and the tiaras and all that sort of stuff stay at home. No question, but you don't need that. You're there to see the animals, and everybody else that's around you is there to see the animals and the wildlife and the culture as well. You are not the one on parade. So very simple. Earth tones tend to work best. You generally will not see bright colors on safari in general. So, cotton pants, jeans, not always the best because it can be sometimes a bit hot and muggy. And, if jeans get wet, they don't dry very well and so on. One of the best things you could absolutely get are those pants that you'll find that zip off. They go from long to shorts by zipping the legs off. They are going to be a godsend for you. They're fantastic. Cotton shirts, both long sleeve and short sleeve. But don't overpack, because at all stages of the journey, you will have the opportunity to have laundry done. And in some lodges and camps, they do the laundry for free. There's no charge for it. So that's something we can advise you on. But even if they do charge, it's never an expense. So this way you pack and you can go 3 days in Cape Town, get to the lodge, be wearing your clothes, goes to laundry, it's back the same day, and you can wear it again and again. So the other thing to be careful, of course, is depending on where, more common in perhaps a Botswana or an East Africa, Tanzania safari, I mentioned those small light aircraft. There are then luggage restrictions on weights and so on. In South Africa, not quite so much, because most of the traveling you're going to do regionally within Africa is going to be on small jets and things like that. So you can generally get away with a regular luggage amount. But but this is something that one of the very first things we'll talk about in the planning stage, and advise you very carefully on, because some of those smaller aircraft, you can't take hard-sided luggage. They need to fit it all in there like a mosaic and be exact and no spaces. So no hard-sided luggage. It all has to be soft luggage, et cetera, et cetera. So these are things. But the biggest thing is pack light, pack light, pack light. You will have the opportunity to rinse things through or to have the laundry done for you, and use it again. Definitely.
All right. I appreciate that very much. And I think overview of a super special place, one that's very a huge favorite for our family. It's one of those that we would all go back to any opportunity. So don't tempt us. We'll definitely go with you. But I think if there aren't any other questions, we'll let everybody get on to their next amazing adventure, and look forward to being able to chat with you sometime real soon.
Everybody.